Hey there, Dear Tech fam. Welcome back to another episode of the Dear Tech podcast. Today, we are diving deep with someone who is basically the startup world's chaos whisperer. Balki Kodarapu is the fractional CTO that has a wild ability to walk into engineering disasters and somehow turn them into scaling success stories. 5 startups, over 160 million raised, a successful exit, and here's the kicker. He's figured out how to make developers actually happy while hitting impossible deadlines. Stick around because we're about to unpack some serious wisdom about building tech teams that don't just survive, but thrive. Let's get into it. All right, Bulky. So I want to start in a quote. I'm going to quote you, okay, and then you tell me why. So you have a quote here that says, "I push every team I work with to carve out 15 hours per week on learning, reflection, and growth." Why is that important?
It's always been important to me and for my teams to carve out some time, but it's even more important today. I'll use the dreaded AI word, Gen AI, right? So it's pushing us all in ways that we haven't experienced. So I've been in the industry 20 plus years, and this is the first time. I'm not nervous, but the combination of curious and maybe even like a little bit of fear how AI is going to change uh, the way we work and how we are respected as engineers. So that's why it's this renewed interest in learning, and it's always been a superpower for me, for my teams, and it's even more important to be in that learning mode.
Yeah. Well, do you ever get any pushback either from the team or from maybe someone like the CEO or someone else? Is there ever any pushback when you bring this up?
Sometimes it's justified. The most common pushback is we have so much to do. How can we carve out time to learn?
Yeah.
We pay you. The other memes are, we're paying you to work, not to learn.
Yeah.
We are already paying you so much, uh, et cetera, et cetera, right? So, but most thoughtful, objective, realistic leaders, founders, I usually work directly with the founders. The most thoughtful ones get it. The even better, they actually are the ones asking to learn, right? So, for example, I'm working with a health tech company based out of Toronto. The founders are young but extremely objective and respectful of the engineering community. So they actually insisted that we spend 20% of our time on passion projects, which roughly equates to that 15 to 20 hours, give or take. So I was pleasantly surprised and happy that these founders are thinking about this. It's a healthy way to engage the engineering community, and it in my opinion and experience, it's actually a win-win for the company as well as the individual to be in this learning and growth mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that probably increases retention quite a bit because in startups, the issue is often that, if some companies figure it out, but if you don't, it's a revolving door, right? People come
Mhm.
in, people go out, people come in, people go out. But this, I can see this being something that definitely helps with retention. All right, well, so so since I addressed the question that was burning in my head, I'm going to go backwards now a little bit. Tell me about your story. Tell me about what brought you into the tech world before you were, in this position or in the positions of being a fractional CTO leadership. How'd you get into tech, and then how did you make your way to make a decision that, hey, you know what, rather than sticking to one company, I want to help many companies and scale that way. So what got you started?
Yeah, my career life has been pretty typical tech journey, but I did have some interesting pivots. Maybe I'll focus on those pivots. So first, I did my mechanical engineering. Uh, but I swore to myself and to my parents that I would not work in mechanical engineering for one day. From a very young age, I was fascinated by computers and software. Long story short, I didn't get into computer science degree, so grudgingly, I joined the mechanical engineering degree, and I never worked a single day in that field. So as soon as I graduated, and during my undergrad program itself, I took a lot of courses and even taught. computers. And then the first opportunity I got, I jumped into uh, a software career. So that's the first pivot for me. And then first 10 years of my career, I was an individual contributor, slinging code at whatever came my way. Towards the end of that part of my career, I did a executive MBA, fully expecting and planning to grow, the climb the corporate ladder, so IC to manager to VP, etc. But the fate had different plans. At the end, towards the end of that program, I we had a entrepreneurship course and also a capstone project. So that changed again the course of what I had in mind. So I was completely fascinated, obsessed with building a startup. So I quit that corporate job and attempted to build a startup for about a year. It was a very humbling, life changing experience for me. Uh, but during that time, I realized that I'm much better and I enjoy the technical craftsmanship and the building the teams part of it more than building my own startups, i.e., help the founders with a vision and the persistence to like go through the tough journey versus me building my own. So since then, I've been working for a number of different startups, 5 in total, relatively on the earlier mid stage of the journey, anywhere from like um, usually I work with startups that have some level of traction, some minimal traction, which means they have some revenue, a product market fit, to anywhere like Series C and B, like 15, 20 million revenue. So on the earlier stage, um, that's what I did for the last 12 years. Uh, wouldn't trade that for anything else. I loved every second of that journey. Uh, about 2 years ago, my mother's health started deteriorating. And around the same time, I was part of a layoff at a company called Support Logic. So that was almost serendipitous that I got a break in this hectic career. Uh, so I spent some time with her traveling back home. Last October, she passed away, and I've been dealing with that for the last year or so. So the last 2 years have been very transformational for my personal and career journey. So at that time, I incidentally got a offer to help a company in a fractional on a fractional basis. I took it on and loved that even more than my full time roles. So I expanded that. So over the last not to like 18 months, I've helped multiple companies. I'm still doing that fractional roles. What I enjoy the most beyond flexibility, that's obvious, the flexibility, but I've been able to do more of what I enjoy. But what I mean by that is at one company, the health tech company based out of Toronto, what I get to do what I enjoy and what I'm good at the most, which is coaching other engineering leaders. So 70% of my role, my fractional role, is coaching principal engineers, engineering managers, etc. The remaining 30% of the time, I'm the steward of their engineering roadmap and engineering excellence. So all things that I love and enjoy, I'm able to do that. And not quite dictate, but I'm able to write my own job description in a way. So that's what I love the most about fractional roles. And fortunately, I've been able to build my career over the last 20 years to be good at defining my own job roles. And, happy to zoom into any parts of this very long answer.
Yeah, for sure. Well, firstly, I'm sorry to hear about your mom, but I'm glad you were able to spend the time with her. I mean, I think that's the time is the biggest thing for the decisions we make. I think that's what ends up happening, and that time being able to give you the perspective of saying, "Hey, I want to go fractional." I mean, that's what's important, right? So,
Thank you.
but I will say that it's very interesting that usually the at least from my perspective, generally when people get an MBA, like you said, your goal was to climb the corporate ladder. So when an MBA is to progress your career, whenever there's some sort of a blockage, all of your friends say, "Hey, get an MBA," right? Like everybody. It happened to me. My mom was on my. She's like, "Get an MBA, right? That'll fix everything, right?" Job markets collapsing, get an MBA, right? Housing markets collapsing, get an MBA. That's I don't know if it's just South Asian families like my mom, or if it's just the way it is, but that's what we see. It's hilarious because prior to me branching off on my own, one of my previous companies, I was planning on doing an executive MBA, exactly that, because I was like, you know what, I need I need a boost in the career. So I totally get that, but it's really interesting that that is what kind of pushed you into an entrepreneur mindset, and even you said that you try to do your own venture. It was a humbling process, but even after that, being part of these startups, even if it's not your personal venture, it's still entrepreneurial, right? It's still very different than the corporate ladder, because it's a and a lot of people don't get it. It's a completely different game, right? The quote unquote, I don't know if stability is the right word, but of enterprise is not there when you're in the startup game. Anything can change at any moment. So that was very interesting. Yeah. So I think often it happens that when you're at a bigger company, it's not always easy to tie into the mission, and more so because I think also, depending on the company, now not to speak ill of all large companies, but depending on the company, it's not always in the forefront of the company's mind, right? Sometimes it's just, hey, get the product out, hey, sell, whatever it may be, as opposed to like a specific mission. So that's totally understood. So let's talk about your first leadership role, right? So your first role, and not so much as like, because I'm sure you've had like senior IC roles, like senior developer, but let's your first actual leadership role. Maybe tell us what went wrong, what went right, what were some surprises in terms of like responsibilities in that in that capacity.
Yeah. So it was in the larger company setting. For what it's worth, my leaders recognized my potential after a few years. In the beginning, as most engineers, I was a very introverted, kept my ideas to myself. But over time, I had good, well wishing leaders. So they saw the potential in me, the leadership potential. So when there was an opportunity to create a small team, um, I was tapped to try that. So just like a simple team lead, and you have a couple people that you'll work with. So I was excited. Um, in terms of what went wrong in hindsight, in a funny way, I was the subject matter expert. So I was the most uh, experience slash expertise. And so typical of a first time leader, I would be very prescriptive, like tell them what to do, when it should be done by, and the quality, and judge on the quality. And if they were not doing it in the time frame or the quality standards I wanted, I would just like snatch the work from away from them and do it myself. Uh, Luckily, that didn't last very long. So I came across a podcast called Manager Tools. I haven't listened to it in a while, but it was one of the first ever podcasts, I think. So Mark and Mike were the hosts that I remember very distinctly. They were um, like talking about the various aspects of being a good leader with a funny twist. So I was instantly attracted, and several things that were attractive to me, which I didn't see in my own leaders. Like they used to talk about specific things about how to trust your team members. One of the things I distinctly remember is I took it to the next level. I asked my company if I could take my team members to lunch, and they said no. There's no way in hell we are paying for it. So I took it up on myself. I'll find a way to buy them lunch as a thank you every once a month or something. And I used to collect coupons for buy one get one, a burrito, or something like that, and then obsessively track those. I'm anyway going to go get lunch, so I'll use this buy one. get one free coupon and take them to lunch. And that became a meme in the entire company that Balki is buying lunch and he uses coupons, right? So I came up with creative ways like that uh, to appreciate and recognize the people. Another idea now that I'm thinking, I actually saw this picture in my feed, in a photo feed. I'm based in Portland, Oregon, so Nike headquarters. It's a monument here in Portland. So they have the quote, "Just do it," right? So I made a twist of that, took an old shoe, framed it, and called it I just did it. So I would recognize every week, I would pass it to somebody who went out of their way to do something for the company and gave them the shoe for a week. So some of these unconventional, funny, creative ways, those were some of the things that I remember. And more interestingly, when I talked to those folks from almost 15 years ago, they still remember.
I think it really is like, I think if the company had paid for lunch, there wouldn't have been much of an impact. Like, you're building a relationship, that's fine, but like you said, right, you using coupons, but you actually going out of your way to think about, how do I take my team out to lunch, that matters more. It's funny you say that, because what I remember for me, same, like the team actually, I never asked anyone if I could do it, but we were remote, so I found one time, like, a discount code for Uber Eats gift cards. So I did the same thing. I got Uber Eats gift cards for like whatever, $20 a person. It was on discount, and I sent those out because I couldn't take them to lunch. And that became exactly similarly. So, but I think again, it's the thought that counts, right? Because if the company paid for it, then all right, company lunch, whatever. But this is the thing, and the shoe thing, that's just brilliant, right? Like, I mean, I read Shoe Dogs, and I know how Portland, that's like the biggest thing for Portland. So that is super cool. And the other thing is, it's interesting when you talk about, you know, first time leaders often do that, where they want to do the work, or they want to be prescriptive, like you mentioned, right? And it's cool that you realize that as soon as you did, because that's actually the downfall of a lot of founders, not knowing how to delegate. I think I read a quote somewhere where it's like 60% good from someone else doing it is better than 90% good of me doing it, type of deal, right? So it's understanding what, I don't know about 60. That's a bit low, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's really really cool that you understood that. So now the other side of things is, because I think you also wrote somewhere like that you love to walk into like chaos. So when did you realize and again, you're an engineer. You said you never wanted to do mechanical engineering, but engineering, a part of it is fixing broken things, quote unquote, right? But you know, when did you realize, like, that's what you have a knack for, as opposed to just build?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is not that intriguing. It's just that just through intention and some of it through luck, I've been in enough chaos within the first few years of being a leader. So uh, I'll simplify this to say, like, chaos is chaos, but it's also 90% of the chaos is predictable chaos, right? So especially in software engineering, quality issues, observability issues, deploy issues, modular issues. So maybe I have a lot of experience, or maybe it is simple enough, but I could whittle down all the issues that happen in a software engineering org to maybe like 20 different things that could go wrong, uh, above and beyond the people issues themselves, right? The people issues are quite unique. But
Yeah.
even those are somewhat predictable. The personas that happen in software engineering and the stakeholders we work with are common enough. So lucky for me, I got to experience a majority of them within my, let's say, 5 to 7 years of my experience. Pfizer, then in the startup, then at New Relic, and then of my 4-year tenure at a company called Paytrace. So give or take 7 years or so, I saw a pretty broad swath of these chaos. Uh, so I also had this. mindset of documenting a lot. So, for example, I have probably 3,000 pages of reflections that I wrote over the years on all the experiences and etc. So, um, all of that combined gives me this. I've seen most of the things. Now, combine that with I also have this deep interest in uh, reaching out to the community. For example, right now I'm part of 5 different masterminds and cohorts. 2 of them are with other CTOs. One of them is with peers that I would typically interact with, head of marketing, head of HR. Another one is with CEOs, startup CEOs. So I'm only, I'm not bragging about all this, but I just have this thirst to reach into the community and both contribute as well as ask them, right? So if for example, if I need a tool for something, I'll give you a very concrete example. At one of our companies, we're looking for a tool to amplify our code reviews with powered by AI, what we call AI powered code reviews. And I've not bought a tool in the past for that. So I reached out into my CTO communities, and sure enough, 2 of them recommended some tools. Then I probed them with more questions, and then we're starting a trial with a tool called CodeRabbit, right? So, uh, you know, like the 3 parts. This chaos. I've seen most of the chaos. Number 2, I've built trusted networks that if I've not seen something in the past, I could go to and get reliable answers and advice. So that's why I'm comfortable saying that I can operate well in chaos.
No, yeah. Well, the thing is the in terms of like building a community, I think as we as we mature, you realize the value of that. Because when you're younger, that sounds very like kumbaya, like of course. And but as you, well, at least for myself, as I've researched success, I see like all of the successful people have some sort of like a mentor or someone that guided them or a community or and stuff like that. But the ironic thing is, if you nowadays, there's a lot of like these online gurus, and they kind of turn some people off to that
Mhm.
idea. But if you look at like old school business, there's always been this idea of community, this idea of we have to figure these things out together, whether or not it's the same industry, like you said, right? Sometimes it's the same CTO, sometimes it's peers, sometimes it's something completely different, because you never know where you can get that from. So that absolutely makes sense. Um,
Yeah. On that
and
topic, if you don't mind me saying this, like
no, for sure.
in the beginning, maybe I'm a little bit later in my career, mentors were invaluable, mentors, coaches. But now I have a few newfound love for peer networks. I think there's much more valuable and a reasonable cost. So all of these networks, except one, I pay into. Like 5 years ago, I would have uh, poo-pooed the idea of paying into a peer network, but now
Yeah.
the ROI is so high for me. I don't even hesitate paying into joining these peer networks, whether it's curated through a moderator or not. I see the value in both, but anyone looking for a mentor, nothing against mentors, coaches, but I think the ROI is much higher in finding the right peer network for you and engaging. And then on top of that, I'll also advise, and I try to follow this advice, that contribute a little bit more than you actually ask for, because your peers will see it when you're just extracting the value all the time. It's a turn off. It's a turn off for me. It's a turn off for your peers. So I try to, not always, but 51% contribution, 49% extraction of value.
Yeah, I think, and again, I think the idea of mentorship is like, at least for me, if someone comes in with like, if someone comes to me and says I want to be your mentor, that's a no. That's I'm running the other way, right? Just after years of exposure to this kind of stuff. But sometimes what happens is like you start talking to someone that's more senior than you,
Mhm.
and you realize like, ooh, like this person is someone interesting, and you just and mentorship's a fancy word. It's friendship,
Yeah.
right? It's friendship with someone that's more senior. It happens with colleagues, happens like that. But you're absolutely right. I am at a point now where I go out of my way to see if I can pay for some of these things in terms of like, I remember there's this a couple of networks I'm a part of, and I met the founder before I knew about the network. And my first question was like, all right, like, do you have something I can pay for engaging?
Mm.
Because for me, is it's not that they're money hungry or something. It's just I want to, like, I know there's value here, and I want to be able to like justify me taking value. That's the first. The other thing is you're absolutely right on the fact that like it should always be, it should be give, and then like maybe ask, or maybe someone gives to you as just because you're giving so much in all these different things. Even like I recently, I'm not sure if there's Alex Hormozy. He's like a marketing
Hmm.
guy, and he was talking about in terms of sales. He was like, how much free stuff can you give? If you give enough free stuff, someone's gonna buy a high ticket item from you. They're gonna come to you separately and be like, hey, can I buy something? So kind of in a similar vein. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the networks are crucial. And again, now we have LinkedIn and we have, there's Facebook and everything. So social networks are there. So we don't think about it, but this isn't a new thing. Like networking and having a network has been there forever. Um, all right. Let's get into, can you tell me the differences between like a CTO, full-time CTO in-house and a fractional? Like what are the main differences? What are the main advantages, disadvantages from your perspective?
The most obvious is can the company afford or justify, right? So um, I'll talk about the clients and where they land on the spectrum. So one company absolutely could not afford a full-time CTO, they let alone a full-time team, right? So they did several things right, including they hired a seasoned engineering team, but affordable, so out of India. But they also quickly recognized that the bridge was missing between the company that's based here in the US and a team talented but also young and maybe not as like directional, based in India. So they recognized and uh, hired me as a fractional CTO. I only spend about 25% of a full-time CTO's comp and expense, but that was the perfect amount for them, being a bridge between the team in India and the non-technical GTM team here in the US. I'll talk about like the other end of the spectrum and then come back to the
Sure.
advantages, disadvantages. So the other company could absolutely afford a full-time CTO. In fact, they tried many different, like four different in a 3-year period. None of them worked. Some of them were highly strategic. Some of them were came from large companies like Amazon, and it was just not the right fit. Some of them focused on areas that didn't matter to the company. They were like, all they did were hire, like just do hiring and nothing else. Um, so from that past experiences, they were like, we are tired of trying these different people, not just the founders, but the team members were tired, like this revolving door of people. So they wanted to experiment with a fractional CTO, and when I offered that, they were curious, and I spent some time with their engineering leaders, the existing engineering who are the principal engineers and engineering managers, and I asked the right questions and extracted the right pain point. So we started like a trial experience, and it's been going great. There's also another nuance there in that company. The founder is very, very um, modern, I would say, for a lack of better word, and he wants to build highly autonomous teams supported by their engineering managers. So, in other words, like he's not very keen on a centralized authority figure like a CTO that who's dictating and like a top down. So I appreciate that, even though it means that I won't be a full time CTO there. What I'm able to do is adapt my um, s- advice services in a way that I'm supporting this highly autonomous, growth oriented EMs to run pods with high agency. So it's a very niche way to offer my services, but it works for them, it works for me. I'll pause there and see if you have any questions, and then we can talk about advantages, disadvantages.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say like going. So I understand the need or want to have these autonomous pods because then you can kind of you don't have to like making changes isn't like steering a big ship, right? You know, these teams can do what they need to do. But like, have you seen? Is there have you seen a downside to that? Because I feel like it sounds very. How sustainable is that in the long term?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for the phase they are in, they're like pretty sizable, like at least in my startup life, mature product, uh, sizable ARR, etc. Uh, long story short, I think we're like the CEO and I are closely observing the progress, and so like we whenever we talk, at least once a month, once a quarter, we're like, do we need a full-time CTO, whether it's me or not? And like the answer has been there's other areas um, to invest rather than a full-time CTO, and there's more downside than upside. And I fully agree with the CEO, right? So it's a moving target for us, and it's been good. The long-term sustainability, my prediction is they're I'm helping them raise a Series A. It's a Series A, Series B, whatever we call it. It is highly likely that during that raise or soon after, the investors would want a full-time CTO to guide the ship. So until then, we were able to enjoy the luxury, both from my side and from the founder side, of navigating the ship in this direction. But in the meanwhile, though, I'm happy that I'm able to support the engineering managers in their journey to growth and wisdom. So I'm like a glorified chat gpt. They ask the chat gpt how to address this challenge or chaos, and then they get something. But if they're not happy with it, they'll ask me and then I'll use my wisdom and experience to guide them in the right direction.
I think that when you have highly specialized teams that know what they're doing, a leader's job is just clearing roadblocks and getting out of the way. That's I mean, if they know what they're doing and they have agency and they have ownership, they have a sense of ownership. That's the biggest. That's why uh, agile development worked so well because everyone had a sense of ownership, right? So this is you're kind of doing that in a significantly larger scale. But yeah, let's go. Let's do the advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, some advantages are again obvious, which is the cost, right? So at the smaller engagement, it's probably like 15% or 20% of the cost. They would have to, like, a loaded cost of a full-time CTO, VPE. At the larger company, it's probably in the like the 40% of the cost. um, so it for the company, it's an advantage, right? So the other advantage is it's a customized offering for somebody like me with a lot of experience. I give them what they need or what I think they need. So they're not getting the unwanted experiences and expertise of a full-time CTO in a way, right? So a CTO comes with a baggage. For example, at one of these companies, the previous VP came from Amazon, and I still see the baggage that comes from Amazon in terms of like a highly loaded career ladder. It's like 100 bullet point career ladder, which is an overkill for this company, right? So they don't need it. They need a career ladder, but much more simplified career ladder. Or same with the hiring process. There's like dozens of pages of how to hire. They don't need it at this stage in the company.
So actually, you transitioned for me. I was going to ask about hiring as a fractional CTO. So again, like you're still leading the ship, but since technically, like if you hire people, they're technically not going to be not your problem or not fully your problem, that type of deal. How do you engage in the conversation with the teams of, hey, we need to hire if you see a gap,
Mhm.
but they don't see a gap, something like that? Like how does hiring work on your end?
Yeah. I'll talk in more meta terms first and then go into
Yeah.
hiring. So previously, when we talked about helping and supporting autonomous teams and their leaders, one of the things I do is probe and meddle with the business, right? In a way, like there are um, like early career engineer EMs and then experienced EMs, but the early career managers, they don't see some of the signals. So like when there's a risk of somebody maybe burnt out or is like looking outside, just because I've seen for so long, I can sense those. I have a hunch, like based on what they say in Slack or one-on-ones, etc. So I those trigger points are conversations with for me with those EMs. Like, okay, this person may be at a higher risk of churn. So it's an uncomfortable but a much needed conversation. Over time, the EMs build their own hunch, but so that's one. So I brought up that topic because hiring needs are a similar opportunity, right? So if an EM is overworked or like constantly like trashing, that's a sign that they need help, but they don't recognize, or they may think that, oh, I have a need, but we are in a mode where in a cost conscious mode, so maybe asking is not the right thing. So um long story short, I also prompt them, like one of the EMs I'm coaching is in a similar situation. He recognizes the need. He has been trying to hire, but it's been months. I was in this mode several years ago where either I'm not looking at the right sources, or I'm in that analysis paralysis mode of finding the most perfect fit, which is quite noble. But if it's actually impacting your own mental health or your team's productivity, then maybe you have to think outside the box. And that's what I'm advising this EM. And I've recruited the more experienced EMs to help this EM to like think a little bit outside the box. If it took you 4 months in this market, there's something wrong in the search process or the hiring process. So we're looking at creative ways to how to solve this logjam for this EM.
Yeah. So I actually just launched my own recruiting
Oh,
company.
nice.
So like this. So from a recruiting perspective, like I see, I'm like, yeah, this market, it's every job application has like 400, 300 applications. So there's it's more up here than it is out
Mm-hmm.
there, type of block. But I think, when you say, okay, I'm gonna go back because it makes sense that younger managers don't see these things, and you see it. But from a perspective of companies, like you said, if you're in a cost cutting capacity, like a company comes in, but you see that there needs to be a higher situation, like you need to hire one way or another. What is that? And again, and I ask this specifically because since you're and I don't know if I'm harping too much on the fractional part, but when you're in house, I think not that you need to build less trust, but when you're not in house, you need to build that much more
Mm-hmm.
trust, right? When you come in and say, hey, you have to spend money, type of deal. So what's your biggest way to kind of work around the issues that may come up in that sense? And it doesn't have to be just for hiring, but like in terms of building trust.
Yeah. Obviously, trust takes time, right? So I learned to build it quickly, but also in a sustainable way. So it comes from saying when not just where the company has to spend money, but equally when we need to cut costs, I'm the one like pointing it out. For example, when I first joined, we were in a major hiring mode, and when I realized not all hiring is created equal, I actually told the founders to let's slow down. I know we have money in the bank and uh, work to be done, but we need to first clean the house of how do we onboard? Do we have good engineering managers and leaders who can mentor? So cleaning the house first before rapidly hiring. And that came from real-time experience for me at one company when we had $120 million in the bank from the VCs. Like we hired irresponsibly, and that was the single biggest cause of the failure at that company. Just because we had money, we hired. It's not a direct leap of faith. There's some intermediate steps in between, right?
Yeah.
Do we need them? Do we need to, like, is there a market for what we're building? Do we have the right uh, systems and frameworks in place to elegantly onboard them, etc. So, and they were surprised. The founders were surprised, but they realized that it was the right thing to do and ask, right? So that's like an example of how trust building works, not just like ways to spend money, but also save and uh, cut the costs. Yeah, that's
Yeah. No, I think it's in some cases, once companies get money, like you said, like from VC or something, for some reason, and it's not that it's wrong, right? Because up until you raise, you don't have money. So when you get it, you're like, I can finally do something. But yeah, very often it's like, let's spend all of it right now, right? Just get back to zero so we can start raising again. But I think also the other issue is the not issue, but in during COVID times, because there was such an influx of hiring everywhere,
Mhm.
it kind of became the norm,
Yeah.
right? Became the norm for every single industry. Is that like it is almost a badge of honor for managers. Like, oh, I'm hiring 10 new people this week, or 20 new people this week, or whatever. So that is definitely when you tell someone to slow down, definitely shows that expertise. Um, but what would you say in on the other side of things? What are some expensive, and especially in the startup world, what are some expensive mistakes outside of overhiring that these engineering teams are making, or are there costly oversights, the things that they're not thinking about?
Um, some common ones are just the cloud spend, right? So um, it's easy to like get addicted to all the cloud, what cloud offers, and keep on using, not having a repeatable process to go back and clean up. So again, one of the companies, we had a older version of Postgres, and believe it or not, that cost like 3x more on AWS. So we just assumed that it's hard to upgrade. But one of the engineers took it upon himself. Like he could not see us spending $10,000 more just because we had put off the Postgres upgrade. And then, first we were cynical, but then he was insistent enough. So we gave him the space and time to go through it. And within like 2 or 3 weeks, he came up with a very good, safe process to upgrade. And sure enough, the our bill went down by 8K or 10K a month, right? So that's another one. The When we are so busy, like not have time to think through this, when somebody pops their head up and say, "Yeah, have you seen this?" It's good to encourage them to act on it. Um, the other one is I'm on the fence on this, like with especially with AI so big these days. At one company, we had spent so much money and time just running experiments and tools nonstop. That was like 30 or 40% of the expense. And we were starving our cash cow while like spending all this money and time on new fancy projects and ideas. Uh, Over there, I did not endorse it. But again, at the company I'm helping now, it's a very measured and practical way. We maybe spend 10-15% of the money of the engineering budget on these new ideas and experiments. And to top it off, this is a Canadian based company. So Canada is interestingly highly incentivizes innovation like this. So a lot of that investment is funded by the Canadian government. So it's fully justified that we take the time and to the money to invest in new innovation. Yeah, so the keyword there is balance, right? So most companies and most startup founders I've experienced, they lean, like the pendulum is more towards let's throw everything we have at new ideas. And I'm not a big supporter of that. I would say do it in a measured way.
Yeah, I think like it's always cool to try new things, but you need to kind of solidify this is what makes us money, or this is what gets us to the goalpost, and then we can try to innovate as we go. But I do think that one thing that it seems like to be a theme of you giving your team members agency, like that engineer raising his hand saying, "Hey, we can upgrade this and save money," and it's not always an environment to be able to do that, right? Many people might want to, but they don't feel like they can. So that seems huge. And speaking about agency, I want to actually go into a term that you mentioned in the form that I sent, developer effectiveness. Can you tell me what that looks like in practice, and give me some like concrete examples of developer effectiveness?
I'll pitch a framework and some terms I've been experimenting with these days. I call it the 4 pillars of engineering excellence. By the way, it's been quite successful when I use that phrasing and then dissect it down to the individual pillars. So there's 4 pillars in my mind. There may be more, but these are the 4 core pillars. So one is observability, two, automation, test automation, three, CI/CD slash deploy automation, and then 4 is modular architecture, right? So I developed a framework and a cool, fun way to grade a company's platform on these 4 pillars. So I grade like anywhere from E to A plus, just like academic grading based on what is the current state of things, and then based on that identify ways to get to the right grade. Again, like A plus is not the right grade on all the 4 pillars. In some ways uh, a B might be good enough for where the platform is right now. So all of these and more contribute to developer effectiveness, right? So in a practical sense, if the grade for these pillars is in a good state for a company slash platform, the developer experience should be, for example, the first day they're able to set up their dev environment without a lot of friction and begging and sweating. Uh, Ideally, they're able to commit their first bits of code on day one. Then within the first week, they're able to um, complete their PR and merge it, and within the first cycle, their bits of code are in production and being used by the customers, right? So that's like one definition of developer effectiveness for me. I would love to hear your opinions or questions on like on that topic.
So if and I was writing them down, but what was the last pillar?
Modular architecture.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like
Uh,
it's a very intentional phrasing versus microservices. I'm not a big fan of microservices for the sake of it. From my experience, microservices cause more headache and maintenance than it's worth. The ROI is very little, especially the types of companies that I help, which is like the most common successful company pattern I see is they are very scrappy and do whatever is needed to get the first customer, 10 customers, first a million in revenue. And almost like clockwork, they get there because they're scrappy and frugal and like do what it takes versus the most beautiful architecture. Every time I've seen somebody build the most beautiful microservices based architecture, I fail to get market traction. I'm very biased in this opinion and like what I see, but that's what I see.
I think it makes sense in the sense that like if you're starting out, and I'm just from my view of the market is when you're a startup and you're scrappy like you said, right? If you build, it's kind of like I think it's the old Facebook analogy, right? It's done is better than
Hmm.
perfect. And if you hold out for perfect, I feel like, at least for my opinion, I'm not gonna say this is fact. My opinion is you're gonna run out of money.
Yep.
That's essentially that's it, right? It's nothing else. You might have the best tool in the world, but you don't have money for sales. You don't have money to get out there and spread the word, and that's why these companies fail. So that I totally get. And I think what you described in terms of an engineer being successful makes sense as well, because again, when you're in a startup, it's time is your enemy, right? Time and money. Those are the two things that kill you. And making your hires, you need them to. There isn't a 3-month ramp up to production, right? There's no 3 month of, okay, we'll train you. You can today. I remember, first day of work. Okay, what am I doing? I'm reading this whole document today. That's my whole day, right?
No.
Maybe that's my whole week. It doesn't happen, right? So I think having that thought process of this is what we expect of you, even before you sit in the seat, changes the game. So absolutely makes sense. And I think, again, giving that expectation to your teams off the bat is what allows you to move faster. Because if you know because sometimes you don't know what the expectations are. That's the other problem about it, because startups are always going to be fast. It's no matter what, but you don't always get the person doesn't always get the expectation, and then it's like, oh, we have a bad hire. It's like, no, you don't have a bad hire. You have bad communication. You didn't express where this person needs to end up. But okay, no, that's 100% makes. Can you actually the so you have test automation and then CI/CD automation. Is that from because test automation, is that from a developer perspective, like self-testing or
Yeah, good question. So maybe I'll elaborate a bit more on the 4 pillars. So
yeah.
first, I'm a big advocate of those 4 pillars in a realistic, objective way, right? Not like, oh yeah, we need to be perfect in each of these. That's like the
Mm-hmm.
other end of the spectrum. Like if we try to be perfect in all of these, again, we've lost. So they are important for me, because if you can see, like, when they are in a good state, those 4 pillars, a developer is doing what they're best at, right? So understanding the customer needs and translating those into working bits of code. Everything else is like in the backdrop, happening like clockwork. So you can imagine this beautiful ecosystem where most of the time the developer spends is not like troubleshooting their local dev setup, or why their feature worked on their local but not on dev, and when something goes wrong in production, they're not spending hours and days figuring out what went wrong, right? So when all of these systems work well, then they're enjoying their experience as a developer, what they're good at. So that's my basis for why these are important. In terms of each of the pillars, maybe we'll talk about the test automation part. That broadly, that bucket is all the like the layers of the test automation, starting from unit testing to uh, end-to-end testing and integration testing, etc. So I have a framework of what is important at what stage, but as a general rule of thumb, unit testing is takes the most time, takes the effort from developers, but it's also the foundational aspect of just the mindset. Again, not having, like, being very anal and purist about I need 100% coverage on every single repo. Again, like, if we have gone that far on the pendulum, I would say we have lost. But the most critical repos have a healthy level of unit testing coverage. Usually it happens to be like 70 to 85% or so. Then we can, like, step off the accelerator and go spend time somewhere else in end-to-end tests or integration tests, etc. So that's my general philosophy about testing.
So I'm gonna, because I feel like, so we go back and you're saying, we want to make sure that developers are doing what they love. That's what making them happy is what basically builds to success overall, right? And you talk about investing in developer happiness, right? That's something that you know seem to champion, that philosophy. and maybe I'm being, this is not devil's advocate, but maybe it's a little bit, I'm being a little nitpicky, but how would you, if you were to sell this, how do you show the ROI? Because many times I'll say, if anything, and especially because you said one of the teams you worked with is offshore, and this, I feel like you can see this a lot in offshore, where it's like, put your head down, work, put your head down, give me code, and that's it, right? Because it's the easiest for engineering teams. Other teams, whether it's sales, whether it's product, what have you, the human interaction is weighed more, I feel like. But for development, engineering, it's put your head down, give me code, and let's push out product. So how do you sell the ROI of developer happiness?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So again, it depends. So interestingly, in some cases, I actually defer developer happiness. And the most obvious case is when I have a 2-month runway before we have to fold the company and go back. Then developer
That's
happiness is,
understood.
yeah,
That's understood.
right. So
Even the developers are like, I don't need to be happy. I need a job. Let's. I'll be happy later. I mean, I think everyone can agree on that one.
yes, and it's a non-trivial number of times I had to do that. In another scenario where previous attempts at developer happiness have extended indefinitely, right? So that's another common scenario where when there isn't a good leader or the engineers are being quote unquote greedy, like they want perfection in the developer happiness, developer effectiveness. I put my foot down and say enough is enough, right? So let's take a couple of quarters where we are just like heads down, delivering on our promises to our customers slash product team, and let's defer these conversations about effectiveness. Um, and when developer effectiveness becomes important is almost all the scenarios it's reactive, right? So like again in this one company, it showed in terms of people asking and asking and asking and getting frustrated and leaving, and in their exit interviews telling them that they're exhausted, that they had to spend 1 week troubleshooting this one issue because we haven't thought about observability, for example, right? So that's how it shows up. It's very reactive, it's not proactive. It's a bad time to do it, but it's still like feedback, right? So that the developers are not engaged, they're not happy, they're getting exhausted doing basic work. So unfortunately or fortunately, then that's what happens in most scenarios. And then like I have to roll up my sleeves and preach the good cause of it's happening because of this, and we can do a realistic way. It doesn't have to be that we stop all development and all new features and do this. We could do this with patience and with a thoughtful and practical engineering roadmap. And again, like that framework of engineering pillars and grading and being realistic about we are a E on modular architecture. It's unlikely we'll get to an A plus over a quarter, but we can get to a B or B minus over 6 months. And here is how we get there. Um, it helps both the engineering team have more patience, and also it's a realistic picture to paint to the founders.
No, but I think also when it comes to some of these, qualms in terms of developers being quote unquote unhappy, some of it is just they don't feel heard. I've seen many times, peers or friends of mine who are developers, they'll work the 12-hour days for 2 weeks as long as they feel heard, as long as the manager is like, hey, I understand this sucks, we're almost there,
Yeah.
right? That kind of just a conversation. It's not even always a solution that you have to give, but sometimes that's the missing factor, where sometimes it's like, oh, there's a problem, but I'm not going to look at it and it'll just fix itself. Because a lot of times, these developers are very much putting it on their back to develop, and they're not, they're like, oh, I don't want to complain. But it's a communication piece of it.
Agreed. Yeah, with two nuances though, like we don't get unlimited runway with that, right? With that mindset, it's like eventually we have to deliver on the promise. So like I cannot with good conscience continue to say, oh yeah, 2 weeks and this project is done, let's start another 2 week cycle of the same. So I cannot do it. I've done it twice, thrice, but I'm what I call like the balance in my credibility trust account will erode quickly, right? So I
Yeah.
like to keep that balance higher than like for the most important emergencies and critical situations. So I'm a
Yeah.
bit greedy and keeping my bank balance high. Sometimes my
No.
bosses tell me like, Balki, you have too much balance in your credibility account. Let's see if we can use it for this good cause.
Oh my god, for the greater good.
Yes.
No, but that honestly, but that is, but that's the secret, because another thing is every day isn't like you're not, every day isn't crunch time, right? Every day isn't the day that's make or break. But if you save your balance till that day, then that day you can put the hammer down, right?
Yep.
And you guys can, it can just run. And that's, again, it's all about like that long vision. And again, you can't always afford it in a startup. We have to appreciate that, the fact that you can't always afford it in a startup, but it's nuanced,
Yeah.
right? You have to be very, very aware. But speaking of all this balance, talking about all this, I want to talk about different kind of balance in terms of, tell me about, you talked about seeing when a developer is about to be burnt out, but tell me about your balance. Tell me about how you keep from burnout, because again, even you're saying you're fractional, but I know you're working with multiple clients, and every different client is a different type of 100 miles per hour. How do you stay balanced? Maybe mention Finn a little bit. I'm dying to hear about him.
Oh my God.
But what's, how does balance work in your life right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk philosophically first. It's been a realization I talked about my mom passing away. That's been pivotal for me to quote unquote find the balance. I would say longer than I needed to in hindsight. I focused on financial and career focus. I have young kids, not as young. They're 16 and 14 now. Like, I'm still kicking myself that I didn't spend enough time with them. So past is past. But all of that said, like in hindsight, I spent a bit too long and more time on career and money. So when my mom's health started deteriorating, I resolved myself like I'll focus on other things and this fractional roles, at least in the short term. I'm actually considering taking a full time role if the right opportunity comes along. But for now, this fractional role itself is a balancing act for me. Um, there's lots of topics here, but one of the ways fractional is helping me maintain that balance is, like, for example, one client has been like a great relationship for the first 6 to 8 months, but I started seeing signs that didn't align with my philosophy. I won't go into too much detail, but
Sure.
in a full time capacity, that would have been a extremely hard thing to do for me to cut that ties. But because it's fractional, I was able to say, okay, this is not the right fit for me. It's encroaching on my personal values and well being. So I was able to cut it and not lose sleep over it. If it were a full time opportunity, uh, I would have lost sleep for months. And it happened in the past. Like whether I cut the ties or whether the company cut the ties, I would take it personally. I shouldn't. This is a job, but I when I pour my heart and soul into something, I take it personally, and I can vouch that most people take it personally, right? So when your career, especially as an engineering leader, it becomes part of your identity. It's not easy to step away from it. So that's one angle where a fractional role is helping me, and yeah, Finn is a big part of it. So I tell people, like, I joke that I have 3 kids and only one of them is important. I'll only think of one of them if the world is going to end.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
that's fair.
Uh,
Uh, yeah,
oh,
he's the most entitled dog this side of the Mississippi River. I think we pretty much put him on our head and like constantly cater to his fancies. We celebrate his birthday. He has his own friend circle, and like we plan our trips based on his sitter's availability. If they're not
Yeah.
available, we cancel our trip. So,
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think my dog's the one on this side of the Mississippi because same, exactly the same. My mom. So if he's like if he's being moody with food, my mom will feed him by hand, or I'll feed him by hand, whoever's around. So it's I totally get that. And I don't think your kids would mind you saying that only one of them's important. I'm sure your kids love Finn. Also, no, dogs are the best.
yeah.
I love it's so cool. But I will say that I think the thing you said about taking it personally or losing sleep, I think uh, you know most careers, but I'll say engineers specifically because engineering is the building. You're building the product, right? Many times people, it's my baby, right? This project's my baby. Um, that's why, right? Because many times we don't separate that this is a job. It becomes this is my baby, and having that differentiation in your mind is very important. And I would encourage if any engineers are listening, make sure you have that differentiation in your mind because it's very easy to get caught up in this is my baby, which it's not. It's not
Absolutely.
even
Yeah.
your boss's baby.
Yeah.
It's not right.
You can write an affirmation, like, and read it every day. I would say, like, this is a job.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a
exactly.
journey. Some companies, especially uh, like really passionate founders, don't like it, but they better get used to it, right? So you're paying them, they're delivering on something. They can be passionate, but they cannot, and you cannot expect them to sacrifice their personal life to as part of your mission.
Yeah. No, and again, I think it comes from the attitude of leadership, right? If sometimes leaders want you to uh, do all that and make this your baby, but they don't give you the same respect on the other side of things. So I think again, if there's a company out there that is truly taking care of everyone and not doing layoffs and paying people extra PTO, whatever it is, right? Then maybe there's a sense of that. But in general, in the normal idea of what the market is in today's day and age, you can't expect your people to if you're the founder and owner of this company, you can't expect your people to treat it like it's their baby.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's the main thought. And continuing on this work-life balance and personal life thought process, you say you consume an unreasonable number of podcasts and books. I do the same. So I love to ask, this is a question for later. So don't tell me your favorite book right now, because that's a question for later. But give me some podcasts and books that have shaped your philosophy, whether if it's in work, personal, leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I shift seasonally. So right now I'm a bit fascinated by health. So I I may have to look up the name of the podcast because I consume so much I don't remember the names.
Yeah, for sure.
But maybe I'll switch back to the craft side of things. So the one I like is the Engineering Leadership podcast. It touches on a lot of aspects of the balance we talked about as an engineering leader, how the market is shifting, how you care for your people, what's the trends in the industry, etc. They do cover a good amount. Um, the CTO Playbook is another one with Adam Harner. So that's about the craft beyond coding, also like a balance of craft and context. In terms of health, I'm looking up this one. It's an interesting one. Simple Healthy Choices is a health related podcast I'm listening to. So these are some of the ones that are sort of the flavor of the day.
Yeah. No, I think I because I think podcasts have evolved over the years. I mean, there's some old school ones that have always been kind of like this, but at one time it was just people one directional talking. But I think now it's much more conversational, which kind of helps the understanding. But I'm gonna put those podcasts in the show notes so that people can check them out. And all right, so can you tell me what? And now I want to transition kind of into more like general questions in terms of like. So the first one's going to be like, what's different about scaling in your opinion in like a Gen AI startup versus like a traditional SaaS company?
Could you maybe rephrase or expand on that question?
Well, it's just like so. I think the way that I'm thinking about it is like AI has changed the way that we're building, right? In general. So now whether it's building a company with Gen AI, which wasn't the question, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think the way that AI has affected engineering would be maybe a more interesting take. But I was wondering, like, do you see if you're building a Gen AI product, is that very different from building a regular SaaS product, like an old school SaaS product? But I think the former question is more interesting.
Okay. Yeah, this could be an interesting topic we could spend 5 minutes on. So I've been thinking and talking about this a lot these days, right? Maybe I'll take a step back. Hopefully, it's not too zoomed out for your audience. So I see for a software company, Gen AI has impacted every aspect. It's an understatement, but I see like I like frameworks. So the frameworks I see are the types Gen AI has impacted is 4 different ways. So one, obvious, like how you're incorporating Gen AI into your product offering itself, right? How you're helping Gen AI, using Gen AI to help your customers. So that's the most obvious way. The second, well, now like there's a nuance there, right? There are companies like Cursor or OpenAI, their whole being, reason for existence is offer Gen AI.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't worked with those, but the the companies I work with are offering uh, support and services to other organizations where Gen AI is adding superpowers to their product
Mm-hmm.
offerings, but Gen AI is not the only thing they're offering. So that's the nuance there. So that's one. The second is how you increase the Gen AI fluency for the entire organization, right? So, for example, like 6 months ago, maybe even today for many companies, if the marketing organization wants a website built or something simple like that, or a simple analytics tool, they would have to nervously go to the engineering org or somebody who's like an engineer and beg and like see how long is it before they could build something for them, right? Something they could not cook up in Google spreadsheets. Uh, but today, we could increase the AI fluency for the organizations and help them build using Lovable or any of the many tools. That's like I call it like increasing the AI fluency for the entire organization, not specific to engineering. It could be HR, it could be marketing, it could be sales, anyone in the organization. So that's the second area. The third area, there's two areas within engineering. One is the straight up our engineers using the best available tools to increase their output. I'm talking about the cursors and Claude Code, etc. Are
Mm-hmm.
they? Is that part of their um, daily rituals to they've replaced the regular tools with these tools? And then part two of that is again, like I'll go back to the engineering pillars in the various workflows an engineering team uses, whether it's automation, test automation, whether it's observability. Are we using Gen AI tools to improve those areas, right? So I mentioned earlier on, for example, uh, pull request reviews. Uh, it's one of the things that slows down the delivery, right? So we've been researching and have narrowed down on a couple of tools. So actually, we used Bug Bounty from Cursor to try, but they kind of switch and baited us. It was free for a couple months, and now it's like $50 or something, and we don't see the ROI. So we went out to the market and researched, and will um, trial CodeRabbit and Graphite. And I'm excited about CodeRabbit, and I think it'll reduce the pull request review time by quite a bit by introducing that into our workflows. So those are like the 4 areas I see, like we can use several levers on where to invest and where to um, accelerate the speed.
All right, and so bear with me. Could you give me a maybe a hot take? Give me a 10-year view of what engineering looks like, software engineering looks like, uh, with the advances we have that we're going through right now. So basically, everything you're going through now, in 10 years, obviously this will be like old news. So somewhere in the future. So give me like a sci-fi view of what that looks
Oh
like.
my God. Yeah, that's the toughest question. I'm such a realist and like as a startup guy, I'm like, I don't see 10 years down the lane. So I may not be the right person to answer this question. Also, like Gen AI is changing so much,
Yeah,
right? So maybe I'll cheat and talk about maybe in the next 2 to 3 years because that's how far I can see it. And this could be
sure.
even sooner than 2 3 years, right? So I'm already seeing some extremely like ambitious engineers becoming orchestrators of these agents, right? So all they do is kick off, like right now it's like dozens, maybe it'll be hundreds and thousands and infinite number of agents that like they're just like orchestrating them as engineering managers, and they could be replacing that many engineers, dozens if not hundreds of engineers, right? So it's a scary picture to see. But that's that's one thing. It's happening already, but it could be happening much more commonly, and it could be a year or two, not even 10 years.
No, I was gonna say I think it's so I feel like many like as because I ask these types of questions quite often because for me it's about like I want to see what the bets are right now, right? So I can look back and be like these are the bets. However, so I either hear what you said, which is I don't think it's unreasonable to think that, right? That it's you can kind of you'll have a few of these people that are doing all these things either solo or with less effort. But then the other side of it is people are like, well, you know what? As opposed to people, uh, teams getting smaller, it's going to be the same team doing 10x the work,
Mm.
so the companies will grow faster, which is nicer. But sometimes I pause and I think, and I'm like, how much more can we like? Where do we go to $1 quintillion in revenue? Like, is that where we're headed? Where it's like trillions upon trillions of dollars and all that stuff? Which I mean, again, it has to be right. Growth, where it's exponential growth for the rest of our lives. But I don't know if you like it's hard to think of.
Yeah. There's one silver lining I'm running into, right? So some of the old style industries are completely ignorant of and skipped many, many generations of advances. Like, I don't know what percentage of like old style companies are on even cloud, or do they leverage the most of mobile, et cetera, right? So we are in a way in a bubble, like the techies of the world, especially the Silicon Valley, the West Coast techies are so deep in the bubble, we don't see how the rest of the world operates, right? So even within the US. So I see a silver lining of maybe they skip several generations of tech advances, but there's a huge opportunity with Gen AI to like really 10x, 100x their productivity, right? So that's that I'm already seeing some traces of that where government or these fashion like really old fashioned industries slowly warming up, and where all of us, especially me, we were fascinated by these fast moving Silicon Valley based companies, but there may be a big opportunity for a lot of us engineers to help these uh, old fashioned but reliable industries.
Yeah, I think well, so firstly, like I mean, I think we can talk about government for days, right? I think government is that's one of the ones where uh that's the first one that should get a full overhaul because it's but there's so outside of these industries, I feel like there's like the example that comes to mind is like because of Gen AI today, or not maybe not today, maybe in like a year, Steve Jobs won't need a Steve Wozniak is the example that I'll
Mm.
give, right? Because because in the past there's many Steve Jobs-ish people who have ideas and they're all these things, but they never found their Wozniak, so they weren't able to build,
Yeah.
right? So I think we're getting to the point where maybe there'll be more builders because the barrier to entry for building will be less. That's one thought. The other one is 100%. I think there's so many industries out there. Like there's so many industries today that we're at version maybe 10, right? Of what originally was in the industry. Now we're at version 10. There are industries out there, they're at version 3, 4. And I even like for me to think about, and I don't, and I'm, no one quote me on this because I don't know it so well, but if you think of like nuclear energy, right? Like this is outside of Gen AI in general, after things like Chernobyl happening, it's staggered quite a bit, right? In terms of nuclear energy, we're probably at version 3 or 4, where if we were at version 10, energy is free for the world, right? That's the thought process. So there's definitely going to be in the next probably, and whoever does that, whoever does what you're saying right now and helps these companies make these shifts, that's going to be the business. That's the next business or micro business that'll make all this money. Because absolutely, I mean, I wonder how many like industrial fishing companies are on the cloud, right? Like that's I don't know why industrial fishing came to mind, but that's just where it went. All right, so Balki, as we're wrapping up, I do this thing called FAQs, frequently asked questions. And the joke is they're not all frequently asked. There's a couple I like to add. So I'm gonna ask you a very the first one is very not creative. What is your favorite programming language, and or what was the first one you ever learned?
The first one I learned was Basic, not Visual Basic. So even before that, there was a language in middle school, Basic. That's what like turned me over into software, right? So I remember like in 6th or 7th grade, our school got these computers, and we just got like 30 minutes a week of even like touching those computers. They were so precious. And I started playing Digger on them, but then the teacher slowly got me into like, okay, Digger is only the gateway drug. You need to actually leverage these computers. So the Basic was the language, and I frequently like had to restart the computer because of I didn't understand infinite loops, and like the only way was
Oh,
to
you
like
just
remove
keep
the
going.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what really turned me to computers when I was in 6th or 7th grade.
And today, what's your favorite? What would you say is your favorite language?
Uh, about 8 years ago, I got my first taste for Python, and somehow I just like Python. I can't tell today why, but it's like until then I was using C# and .NET. That was my bread and butter. So I didn't know anything else. I thought I would use the C# for the rest of my life. So when I got this like raw beauty of not having to use a bloated Visual Studio, and I could use a very simple editor to write Python. I don't know that's like the right reason, but I felt like yeah, the PEP 8 standards and things like that, and also there's like a very unconfirmed bias there. So we were using C# on a very old version of Windows, and it was hitting some of the limits of the operating system. So my team and I decided to use Python on Linux, and that was very freeing. Like there were no limits for some of the things we were using. So it's super biased, but that's
I
like
mean, as it should be, right? Favorite should always be
yes.
biased. Okay, so you majored in mechanical engineering. You promised not to do that. If you could go back in time, you can't pick computer science, right? What major would you pick? Do you think would prepare you most for what you go on to do?
Oh, interesting.
It
No.
just randomly came to me because I it's funny though, and as you're thinking about it, I'll say, uh, I know personally probably like 5 or 6 mechanical engineers. None of them are doing mechanical engineering right now. 0%.
It's sad.
I think one of them is a PhD in mechanical, and they're not doing mechanical engineering right now. Not even kidding.
Pretty sad.
Uh,
um, it's a hard one, but I would say on the spot, um, civil engineering. You know, I was interested in construction and stuff like that. So in my backyard, I used to build like mud buildings and bridges and tunnels and things like that, and I enjoyed. I know it's somewhat related to mechanical engineering, but construction and
Yeah,
civil engineering was another thing I liked when I was younger.
that's really cool. Oh, what is okay? So, what is the best advice you've ever gotten?
Mm. It's I don't know if it's the best, but the first thing that comes to mind is about engineering. I'm so deep in the craft of the engineering. Is like my boss at Paytrace, Trevor. He was one of the wisest people I ever worked with. He's like, Balki, the best thing an engineer could do is just sit quietly and not write any code. And it's more true today than ever, right? Like when it's so easy to generate AI slop code that anyone could do it, the best thing we could do is like just reflect on if we really need to write this piece of code.
Very, very interesting. That's probably one of the most interesting answers I've gotten to that question. Um, all right. What? Okay. So, what is your favorite book or the book that you like to gift the most?
Super biased. So my kids recently wrote and published a book
Oh
called
wow.
Audacity to Start. Um, they started a nonprofit about 3 years ago, and it's been like the most interesting journeys for me supporting them. It's
Wow.
grown quite a bit, almost like a Silicon Valley startup, like double-digit growth every year. It's a
Wow.
chess nonprofit, and so they documented this summer. They documented that uh, in a book, and it's titled "Audacity to Start," and I've been helping them promote it. So I gift it to people, right? Right.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's going to be great on a college application. I can't. I mean, that's beautiful. Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, yeah. It's on sale
Okay.
for um, the ebook version is on sale for 99 cents right now.
All right. I'll put the link in the show notes. I mean, that's incredible. That's the and a little bit of a tangent, but I think in high school, like taking these chances and building these things, because there's no downside in
Yep.
high school, right? There's zero downside, and I wish that I had the idea to think about these things because in at that age, the funny thing is there is no downside, and we see that as adults. But when you're a kid, you think it's all downside. Oh, what if it doesn't work? End of the world,
Yeah.
right? Because you don't have perspective.
They have the
But that's the
time,
best time.
patience, and health to try it. And
Yeah.
we have a love-hate relationship with the college application process in the US. But I think things like this, them doing this very vague requirements of help the community, it's in a good way, right? So sure enough, like we wanted them to do something because of college applications, but within 6 months it had grown into something much bigger than like, okay, this is a part of my college application. So they could have stopped after like teaching 10 kids or conducting a tournament. So now they have like tournaments with hundreds of people. They've taught thousands of people. They have 25 volunteers. Like it's consuming my life and their life. And like, okay, this is this is not for a college application. It's
Yeah,
much
yeah.
bigger than that.
Balki's like, is this your project or
Like,
my project?
exactly.
I that's usually how it
Like
is with kids with the things that they do. It's like parents get more involved.
yes.
But I do think that's the with anything, right? If it gets beyond the I want to do it up until this point, everything we do is I want to do it up until this point. If it goes beyond that, that's when you know it's real,
Yes.
right? That's when you know it's awesome. Because yeah, that's incredible. I'll put it in the show notes. All right. So as we're wrapping up, tell us where can people find you?
Yeah, for good or for bad, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. There's mixed feelings these days about social networks, even LinkedIn, right? It was supposed to be the last good network, but it's going sideways. But for now, I spend my time there. I post there twice a week about my thoughts about life and engineering leadership, most importantly. And yeah, you can find me there. I should be the first Balki you'll find when you search, Balki. I'd love to connect with peers, your audience, anybody who's looking for fractional advice or a fractional CTO. So
Yeah, I'll put your link on the show notes. And what's next for you? What's next for you? What professionally, personally? What's on your horizon right now or on top of mind?
yeah, I mean, I I helped one company exit in a very small, humble way. I my dream is to help one or more companies uh, exit in a big way and for the give a good outcome for the founders, for myself, and the team members. So uh, being a fractional CTO, I think I can partake in that journey multiple times, and so I'm hoping to repeat that a few times over the next 5 years.
Hell yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun. All right, as we're wrapping up, anyway, what's the last message you want to leave everyone with?
Um, yeah, I mean, this is my advice. I write affirmations and focus on what's missing in the balance, right? So, for example, like I have right in front of me. So there's only 5 or 6 parts of your life: your career, the financial freedom you want to achieve, your immediate family relationship, your extended family relationships. Uh, you can balance on different things at different parts, stages of your life, but do it with utmost intention. Like when you're younger, you can absolutely focus on health is the other part I missed. So you can defer your health for until your 20s or 30s, but after that, you better focus on health, right? So focus on anything you want, but be very intentional, and you could do that with affirmation. So that's my advice to my younger self and even my current self.
Awesome. All right, so for everyone listening at home, be intentional.